Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 16 of the Sharper Edge podcast with Betty Parker. As usual, I am grateful that you have decided to stop by one more time to take a listen to another option and effort to handle people issues. We all face them each and every day, in no matter what aspect of our lives we are operating in, whether it's at work or at home or in our communities. We are faced with people issues because we deal with people on a regular basis. And because so many of us are not exactly the same, we tend in our differences to approach things in a way that might be a little off-putting for the other side. Maybe in their disagreement with the way we approach things, a conflict situation arises. So we have to figure out, how do we navigate this relationship in a way that the outcomes are acceptable for both sides. And even if the other side does not get what they want, they don't feel like they have lost. So people issues are all around us. And I'm sure you face quite a few of them yourself. I'd be interested in hearing which are the most difficult for you. What one might you be facing even right now, and you're a little befuddled about what to do about them? This podcast is designed to invite discourse, to hear from you, to anticipate your questions, to ask questions of you so that you might get involved in the discussion and hopefully find some solutions to what you've been struggling with for quite a while. So I invite your input, I invite your respectful comments, and I invite you to be a part of the discussion. I also invite you to share this podcast with other people, because we're of course trying to, grow who we share this information with. We want to spread the word as much as possible. We want to help people as much as possible. I am a coach. I am a certified professional in talent development. My goal is, yes, to develop people in their workspaces, but also in their personal lives. If there's something that you have been grappling with for a while and you just want to, I've talked a lot about us being introspective and doing the hard work of looking at us and determining those things about ourselves that, basically we need to work on. It's okay if that's something that you are struggling with in some capacity. Please, by all means, hit me up. Hopefully, I can help you with it. And if not, I can bring it in front of everybody else, because quite possibly what you're dealing with, other people are dealing with as well. We are unique in a lot of ways, but our challenges are very similar. Okay, so feel free to reach out, and I'd love to have a greater discussion. So, what I want to do now is go back to a discussion we had a few episodes back when I brought up my book, Crushing Goliath. Here it is, Crushing Goliath: Winning Practices for Slaying Giant People Problems. I wrote this book simply because oftentimes when I would go out and train, people would ask me various questions about, what do you do about this issue? What do you do about that issue? How do you approach this one? What happens when this thing happens, right? They had lots of questions. And even though we would talk about them in the training classes or in coaching sessions, I feel like there's so many people who have those same issues. And what if I could just put it in a book that would, raise those, surface some of those issues and help people find some way to rectify some of the challenges that they face. I wanted it to be a book that could help an individual who wanted to study and be introspective and roll some of their challenges around in their own minds and come up with their own possible solutions, or it could be approached from a group standpoint. So this book is written with groups in mind, book clubs potentially, where folks can read, get together with a team or a group of folks, even and especially in the workplace. There are case studies in here. There are introspective questions. There's time to reflect. There's time to be self-aware and to own some things. There's some times where we have to look at it from an external standpoint, an objective standpoint, and figure out how to manage the situation. There are all kinds of scenarios in there. So it invites questions. It invites answers and problem solving. It invites thought and critical thinking. It's a book about problem solving, not necessarily technical issues, but people issues. So put all of that in this very, small book. It's not a very, very thick book, but it is a book that's going to raise some questions for you. And if you want to get a copy of it, here you go. Feel free to go to crushinggoliath.com to grab your copy today. Pull together a group of friends or coworkers and create a book group, a book study group, where you all can go through each one of the chapters, look at each practice that I recommend, and see how you can apply it to your own team. Hopefully, some great things will come out of it, and you all will find a way to create some team norms where when conflict exists or crops up, then you all will have uh, some type of, rules of engagement on how you are going to face those issues, fix those issues, and then keep your group cohesive and collaborative and cooperative. That's the goal of the book. A few episodes ago, I mentioned the first practice in my book, Crushing Goliath: Winning Practices for Slaying Giant People Problems. The first practice was to clearly define what the issues are. It is so easy for us to fall into this trap where we are arguing certain challenges that we think are really big, but in actuality, they're just symptoms of a bigger and a deeper issue that has not been surfaced. Those that we keep to ourselves, those that we are afraid to bring forward because we know the difficulties and the complexity of that issue. And it's easier just to try to put a band aid on it, to tamp down the rhetoric sometimes, and just try to, move past some of the more hurtful, the more painful things. But as a result of us handling this conflict in that way, it keeps cropping up. It never really goes away. And that's generally because it's never been fully resolved. So I implore people, the readers in the book, to clearly define what the issue is. And I give them two questions they should ask regarding surfacing what that is. So go back and look at, I can't remember the exact episode, but go back and search it out. I think it might be, this is episode 16, so it might be around episode 13, 14, somewhere in there. Okay, so now I want to take you today to practice number 2. Okay, and practice number 2 says, okay, once you've clearly defined what the issue is, what happens if that issue is so big, it seems insurmountable? What happens if that issue seems like it's something that can't be resolved because it is so complex? It does have so many layers to it. It is so deeply painful that we feel like you and whoever the other party is that you're, our parties that you're working with or have some odds with, that you just don't feel like you can come to a place of healing and repair. So what I challenge you to do in the second practice is to change your view. Look at the issue differently. In fact, here's what I say about it in the book. When examining a problem that appears too big to handle, do this: change your view. Consider all the angles thoroughly so you can see the entire picture and broaden your perspective. The questions related to this practice help the problem solver break the issue down into smaller chunks or change the way the problem is seen altogether. Further inspection is necessary to determine how one can reshape the issue into something that is more manageable. So, a lot of times when we are faced with some difficulties in life, some people issues, some personality challenge, something where it's our relationship has somehow gotten off track and we don't really know how to fix it. And it seems like it's too big because a lot of things have been said, a lot of things have been done, and they seem irreparable. There's no going back. There's too much pain associated with what's been said, and forgiveness has not taken place. Apologies have not taken place. And let me even back up. Even if the apology has taken place, forgiveness has not been given. So there's still this holding on to the pain and the trauma that this issue has caused. Now, one side might be willing to work it out while the other says, no, my pain is too great and I don't even want a relationship with you anymore. On a personal level, you can sever that relationship. It's a time in your season where you were with that person and now you no longer see the value in that relationship. But if we're in a work environment where you have no choice unless you quit your job or the other person quits, and that may not happen for a long time and you still have to eat, you got bills to pay. So some way you all still have to work together. You can't avoid them. They're on your team. They may even be your boss or supervisor. So how do you repair that which is broken so that you can come into a workplace where you feel comfortable and at ease? You're not trying to avoid the person. You're not harboring hate and anger within you that's eating you from the inside. So you got to figure out how to work this thing through and work it out. And it's going to require that somebody make a move. It's going to be necessary for somebody to humble themselves, to break down this wall that's been put up, somebody to not only ask for forgiveness, for another to extend forgiveness and grace to somebody, for a person to look at themselves and say, can I be this hard on the other individual when I have also done some things in my life, might maybe not necessarily to them, but to somebody that caused an equal amount of pain. So who am I to sit here and to judge them more harshly than the other person has ever judged me? Right? There's so many things that we have to be aware of. So when we think the problem is too big, we have to stop looking at the negativity that's associated with the problem and look for the possibilities. Move away from the pessimism and move to positivity. And if we're looking at it and changing our view, then we can see a pathway to some type of reconciliation with that individual. Are you willing to do it? And that's what it becomes about, your will to make things better, the will of the other side to make things better. Problems become inflamed because of a reluctance and a resistance on the part of either of the parties to make things work. If you want solace, if you want reconciliation, if you want a peaceful environment, if you want more control, and when I mean control, I'm not about controlling the other person, but controlling the situation so that it becomes what everybody wants, which is peace. If you want an environment where there's no anger and resentment being harbored, where there's not this constant undercurrent of anxiety and tension, where people feel uneasy even being in your presence because you bring that with you, or when they come in the presence of you and the person you're at odds with, they feel uncomfortable too, because that affects everybody around you. And so it's not just your problem, it becomes everybody else's problem in the workplace. And so if we want to eliminate that because we have enough other things to deal with, perhaps you got difficult clients you got to work with, maybe you got some broken processes or policies or even procedures that exist in your workplace that really need your attention, and you don't have time for all of the, all of the silliness that comes from people who don't know how to have serious conversations about their differences. We got to figure out how to work through and past the people issues so we can get to the more important issues of dealing with what our clients need and being able to better serve them. So, like in practice number one, practice number two, when using it, important questions need to be asked. All right. We asked two important questions in practice one. So, here's the one for practice two. If I looked at this from another positive angle, what would I see? And I put the positive parenthetically, it's in parentheses, simply because to just say, if I looked at this from another angle, what would I see? If I'm looking at it with the intent of making things better, I have to take away all of the stories that I've told myself that created this very negative view in my mind that said this can't be fixed. Quite possibly it can. And it will if you're willing to strip away all of the pain that's been created, sometimes by yourself, because maybe the issue has only grown bigger in your mind and not necessarily in actuality. You've put that record on and you've played it over and over and over again about what happened. The more you played it over and over again, you may have slightly changed some of what actually occurred, because if we ask the other party what happened, they may have a different view, a different perspective. Even while you all were in your conflict situation, if there was an argument that transpired, the way you perceived what they said and what they perceived you said could easily have been misunderstood. It happens all the time in arguments. And if you're not willing to discuss that in a way that is not biased, in an objective way as much as possible, even if you have to bring in a third party to say, hey, that's not what I heard, then you can fix this. You just have to have the will to make it happen. You just got to be willing to come in front of the person and invite them in to a discussion with you to finally lay all the cards on the table. And if necessary, wipe the slate clean and start anew. So in looking at this issue from another more positive angle, what would you see? The positive view is parenthetical because not every situation will have a silver lining. This is directly from the book. But when one does exist, the problem solver must seize it. That's you. Seize the problem, seize the opportunity to fix the problem. To not look for the best possible outcome is to relegate the issue to an agonizing battle against certain defeat. And that's what it is. You've already checked out. You've already lost the battle because you have chosen not to fight it in the first place. Okay. And in winning this battle, it's just not about you winning, it's about both sides. We should never set up a win lose situation. You don't always have to be right, they don't always have to be wrong. But if there is mutual agreement on how to fix it, maybe there doesn't need to be a right or wrong. Maybe there just needs to be an answer that says, here's what we both can live with, here's what we both own in our disagreement, here's what we both agree would be beneficial for all sides and all parties, and here's what we're going to do going forward to make this thing work. The acceptance of loss without a fight is hard to attack and win against. The battle is just as valiantly fought in the mind. Okay. We fight in our heads all day long because, as I mentioned, the repetitiveness of what occurred, if that person, we always use this, I'm hearing a lot of times people use this term, this person lives rent free in my head or in their head. And they say that because they know some people just get obsessed with the issue. They get obsessed with the other person. And the more they just think on these situations, the more they blow up something that was minuscule, that whole mountain, that molehill becoming a mountain, right? Because we relive it over and over again. And we do that because in some ways it must give us some satisfaction. It gives us permission to be angry. And some people like living in that anger, especially if they think they're right. So what they tell themselves in their mind, they tell themselves a story about how wrong the other side is. And then they start adding a little bit more on it. And the more they think about whatever the incident was that occurred, the more that incident morphs into something that moves farther and farther away from the truth and from what actually happened. But it makes that person who's reliving it over and over again feel better because it justifies their anger. Now they have a reason to be upset with that person. They have a reason not to talk to them anymore and to hold a grudge. They have a reason to walk into that meeting with a chip on their shoulders. And so when they do that, it says it's okay for them to have the attitude, when in actuality, no, they're becoming more of the problem than the problem itself. Taking a different view of a difficult situation requires that all angles be explored, especially any positives that come from it. Search out the positives. You have to be deliberate and intentional about looking for the better aspects that you can grasp onto. When I work with people on conflict issues, I always tell them, let's look for common ground. What do we agree about in this situation? What can we agree upon that happened in the situation? What can we agree upon that we'd like to see as an outcome from the situation? The more we can get people nodding and saying yes to something, then we have something we can grab hold to get them to a point of resolving the issue. Letting people stay in their differences and co-signing on a lot of bad behavior because it's what they want, it's something you want because some way you benefit from it too, is very destructive. And you cannot build back relationships from that. And in fact, you will create something that can no longer be repaired. Oftentimes, a problem weighs down the leader because they see it in its enormity and complexity. They see what is broken, not what is working. They do not capitalize on the benefits, they only see the pitfalls. When faced with a crisis, courageous leaders face the risks and they go against the grain. So, what you'll do then, if you're this courageous leader, you say, you know what, this doesn't feel right necessarily, but it is the right thing to do. And what I mean by that is it'll make you feel like you're giving in. It'll sometimes make you feel like we're at an impasse and there's no fixing this. But when we are willing to say, listen, as uncomfortable as this makes me feel, and going to somebody who I know has created themselves and made themselves out to be my enemy, I'm still going to do it. It's not wrong. It just feels uncomfortable. We mistake right and wrong from uncomfortable, discomfort and comfort. And because we don't want to do the uncomfortable things, we mistake what is uncomfortable for being wrong. And that's not the case at all. So sometimes we got to press through those feelings and we have to be brave and say, as much as I don't want to do this, as much as I don't want to face this person, as much as what this person said really got under my skin, the bigger picture is we've got to learn to live together, live side by side with each other, serve together in this church or in this synagogue or in this temple. We've got to live in the same neighborhood together. We've got to go to the same school together. Our kids have to learn to work well together. I've got to go into this workplace with this person These teams have to learn how to forge better relationships because at the end of the day, we have a client to serve, all of those things, right? We have to look at the bigger picture. It's bigger than us a lot of times. And we've got to get out of ourselves, stop taking so many things personally, and go for what the broader purpose is. So, those courageous leaders that go against the grain, they seek out a different way. Acceptance of the norm and the expected prevents allowance for the unusual, the thing that could be a solution, but is not ordinarily considered. So these people, these courageous leaders, move outside of what is expected. And they say, how else could we approach this? What are we not thinking about? This might be unusual for a situation like this, but would it still fit in resolving the issue? Leaders should imagine a threat by turning it on its head. What would tend to work against a company in a trying situation could actually be the catalyst that helps boost it. And the same thing with a personal relationship. What you might think might not work could actually be the thing that does work. And the reason why I raise this is because oftentimes, not only are we looking at the problem in a superficial way, but we're looking at the potential solutions in a superficial way as well. Have we thought about all the angles? Have we looked at the more positive aspects of it in such a way that it would be applicable to resolving an issue that looks like it cannot be fixed? But sometimes we don't want to approach the positive. Sometimes we like being in mess. That satisfies us. And so that's when we got to go back to that whole self-awareness and ask ourselves the deep and dark questions sometimes. Why do we like it? What are we benefiting from it? Why do we accept or find it acceptable to sit in our hate and disgust and just talk about other people and gossip about other people and make accusations and point fingers and seek vengeance and all of those things that people tend to do because they've identified somebody as an enemy and they don't want to work well with their enemies, right? That other side might be willing to accept a lot about you that is wrong and broken as much as you have not accepted the things about them that are wrong and broken. We sit over on one side in our own glory, our self-aggrandizement, and we sit in judgment of other people. We don't want to work with them because somehow we have diminished their value and elevated our own. And we have become a part of the problem. And we won't accept that we are. So courageous leaders say, I'm going to turn this thing on its head. I'm going to look at all angles of it. I'm going to try to find a way to fix whatever this people issue is that I'm dealing with. And as much as the person who I am at odds with might rub me the wrong way, maybe they may even resist and reject my invitation to try to rectify this thing, I'm still going to do the right thing because it's what's required of me. It lines up with my personal values. Maybe one of your personal values is this, that you want to create a space where there is transparency, hope, and trust. You live by a value that says, I don't want to be at odds with people. I want peace. I want tranquility as much as I can get it. I want to create collaborative environments. I want to be a friend to people. I want to check myself in those moments when I know I need to check myself. I want to be as objective as I can about how I behave and the way I treat other people, right? There's so many things that if you've identified, you heard my previous guest, Ron Harvey, and I talk about identifying what our personal values are. And then you have to live those values out loud. So what are yours? Have you had a chance to think about that since we last, spoke, or the last time you looked at that episode? And if you haven't seen it yet, it's episode number 15. That's the one we just had this conversation last week. So once you identify who you are and how you are, then you go out and you live that and you set up boundaries for people so that they will know, here's how you connect with me. And I don't let anything else happen in my life outside of these boundaries that I've established. I want you to respect my boundaries and I will respect yours. But you got to first know how to establish those. You got to set them up and then be able to respectfully allow other people to know what they are. The issue I've said many times before, you've probably heard me say this, is a lot of people don't know that they've crossed lines that you set for yourself because you haven't clearly defined them. They only know it once they've crossed them. And sometimes we only know that somebody's crossed it when we check in with ourselves and feel really odd about how somebody just treated us or what they said to us. It didn't sit well with us. And so we know, I don't like that. So I'm gonna create a line. I'm gonna draw a line right there. And I don't want anybody ever to talk to me that way again or to treat me that way again. Another passage in my book, Crushing Goliath, Winning Practices for Slaying Giant People Problems, goes like this. When it comes to people problems on the job, there is none more difficult than weak leadership. If the leader is a poor example to the team, then the team loses faith in them. Lost faith in leadership is hard to recover unless the replacement makes bold moves that restore the people's confidence. When people are looking to their managers and supervisors for guidance and leadership, they're looking for a confident person, a knowledgeable person, a person who has enough wisdom that they can lead the team in such a way that not only are the problems resolved quickly, but people feel confident about their work. They feel confident in following this person because this person has a proven pathway to success. No matter how dicey things get, no matter how difficult the road ahead, they can have confidence because their leader leads with vision and with confidence and with a decisiveness that says they know what they're doing. But the paragraph goes on to say this in my Crushing Goliath, chapter 2, practice number 2. Unfortunately, too many organizations hold on to ineffective leaders for far too long, and they damage the assurance of a team. An entire organization suffers because problems are not handled proficiently, and encouragement wanes among the troops. Additionally, organizational values get lost along the way. Trust, respect, and accountability. Are those your organizational values? Do you know what your organizational values are? Have you established them for yourself? And if so, have you also established them for your team? And if so, are your teams living these values out loud? Recovery is protracted and difficult in conversations or situations that have not been resolved or brought to a place of acceptance and tolerance by others. All right. There are many scenarios within this chapter that I think if you and your team got together and read about them and discussed them, you might find a little bit of that on your own teams or within your organization. And maybe, just maybe, you all can come together and figure out a way to help resolve it. Because as much as I try to present, different situations in this book, there are those nuanced things and those very specific situations that occur that I can't possibly know about, but you can add them to the scenario. They're written loosely enough where you can make them a part of what your work experience is like. And in so doing, then walk through the steps and the practices that are identified in this book that you can get on crushinggoliath.com, and then just talk it through and go back and refer to it. If you should ever, have a situation where it rears its head again, you can say, hey, remember we had that discussion? What did the book say about the practice that will most effectively be applied to this situation to make it better? And I challenge you to do that thing. I challenge you to get the book. I challenge you to sit down and talk it through with your cohorts and whoever else, whoever the other parties are that might be that might need to be at the table with you. Let's get to some solutions, y'all. Let's fix some of these people issues. If yours is way more complex than anything that I've talked about right now, please, drop it in the chat. Raise some questions. Challenge me. I'll challenge you. Be a part of the discourse. I welcome all of your respectful comments and input. And I thank you for stopping by yet again this week to hear a little bit more about what I have to say regarding these people issues. Next week is going to be a dynamic discussion because we're going to talk. I have a guest coming in, and we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is so important that we strip away all of the myths, all of the misunderstandings, all of the negativity that has surrounded DEI in the past few years. People with big platforms have come out and said a lot of things that are so far from the truth, and they have negated a lot of the hard work that has been done up to this point to bring equality and equity as well as inclusiveness to a diverse world we live in. And so join us next week as we tackle that. I definitely know that there are going to be some comments around that because it's controversial and people love folks who probably wouldn't ordinarily even talk to me are going to pop in on this. If you're one of those people who only speak because you like to get into the fray, you might want to check yourself on that too. But still, I invite everybody's comments. Jump in there. I'm willing to have the conversation with you. And I think it's important that your voice be heard. Everybody's voices be heard. So thank you. I hope you have a great week. And I look forward to seeing you next week in episode 17. See you soon.